All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics. My name's John Palomeni. I'm the immediate past president of the organization. And for those of you who don't know about the U.S. Society for Ecological Economics, we are the main organization for ecological economics in the U.S., where we have a broad spectrum of members from practitioners to academics doing work in ecological economics, which we all know is so important today. Some of the things that we try to do are various research seminars, which we'll have one next week on the 23rd at noon Eastern Time, if you'd like to participate. And what we're doing today is a book club, which we do about twice a year. And we're very fortunate that our book club is organized and run by past president Laura Schmitt Olabisi. And she'll be talking today about and leading discussion on the book Fresh Banana Leaves. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So welcome everyone. I'm Laura. I'm a professor at Michigan State University in the Department of Community Sustainability and a past president of USSEE, like John said. And if you're not familiar with USSEE, I think most of you probably are, but if you're not, you can go to the website to learn more. And we are organizing a conference this June, and there's a call for proposals that's currently open. So you can check that out. I wonder if we want to, since we're a small group, I'd love to, I think I know some of you, I don't know all of you. So do you want to just open your cameras and unmute if you can, if you're in a place where you can, and just briefly introduce yourself? And then maybe mention, so here's something that I found in past book clubs is that we sometimes have a mix of people who have read the book and people who haven't but are interested. So I think it would help me to get a sense of like how many of you read it, just so I know how much to summarize versus assume people read it. So maybe we can go. So I'll call on someone, and then every person, when they're done introducing themselves, maybe call on the next person. We'll just popcorn like that. So, or sorry, pass it around in a line. So Stephen, you're next on my screen. So maybe you want to introduce yourself?
So I am a Master of Science candidate at University of Vermont, working with Josh Farley. Um, my work is in epistemology of relational sovereignty. So I read the title of the description and thought I had to be here. Um, Jason?
Hi, thanks, Stephen. My name is Jason Barahona Rosales. I am the program coordinator at Degrowth Institute. That's just a nonprofit based in Chicago trying to sort of share these ideas of challenging endless economic growth. I don't know if you said whether we need to say whether we read the book. I have read the book. Okay.
Awesome.
And then next on my screen, I see John.
Well, I just introduced myself as a
My
past.
bad.
No, you're fine. Past
I can say
president.
Brenda. If
I actually have my degree in ecological economics from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. There's a few of us that have got that degree, and my work is largely in sustainable energy and agriculture. Although I have just started some new research on the North Atlantic right whale, and I teach economics at the Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Science, and do some courses there. So I will turn it over to Brenda. Or Deb
If
Nazon.
some are not able to unmute, that's totally
Yeah.
fine.
Deb Nazon.
Yeah.
Hi, I can't turn my camera on. Not feeling well today, but I thought I'd come on to see that I have not read the book. And I'm Deborah Nazone, and I was a classmate of John, so I too have a degree in ecological economics, one of the few, I guess, of us out here. And also, I have an LLC, which is Eco Diversities, and the primary interest is really being a co-creator of sustainable and intergenerational wealth in urban communities. So I'm really focusing on wealth creation in urban communities and being a co-creator in that space and making sure that it is intergenerational. And so we really focus on collaboration, cooperation, and, communication. That's how we do it. We've got to come together. And I always say, quote, Lynn Twist, collaboration creates prosperity. So that's what I'm hoping to really see in these urban communities, as well as unearthing the inequities of urban land use, and particularly home ownership, and creating a pathway of urban STEAM leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. Elena, are you able to speak?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm here just kind of grabbing my coffee and everything around the 60-person graduate student cooperative that I live in. A little bit chaotic around here. I am a fifth-year PhD candidate at UC Berkeley Agricultural and Resource Economics Department, hoping to graduate this semester. We'll see. And just recently got plugged in with the ISEE and the USSEE. I don't know. Sometimes I forget how many S's there are. Um, I listened to the audiobook and in alongside the PDF and really enjoyed the book. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome.
Is there anyone left?
Peter.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, I'm back again after going back for
Uh-oh, Peter, your internet is breaking up, I think. Unless it's mine. I think, yeah.
No, it's not. It's I think
Okay.
yeah.
Definitely Peter's, because we've got the same problem. Peter, why don't you turn off your video and try just doing audio?
question whether I'm actually bona fide and back and forth with the US. So I guess
Okay, start over, bro.
Oh no, we lost him entirely. Oh, yeah. Well, hopefully here he is.
You better just go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, if you get the chance
We
later
can hear
on,
you now.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I really enjoy these book conversations. Basically, this is my way of like forcing myself to make time to read a book I really want to read, and then talking about it with other interesting people. So thank you all for indulging me in my my personal growth, I guess. So I know it sounds like about half of you maybe had the chance to read it, half you didn't. So I will just briefly kind of summarize some of the main themes of this book. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. So Dr. Jessica Hernandez is a conservation scientist, and she also runs a nonprofit. And the overall kind of argument of this book is that indigenous worldviews are critical to conservation. The statistic that I think some of us have heard before is that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is in areas that are managed by indigenous people groups. Yet their voices and perspectives are not even close to being equally represented in both kind of scientific and policy and management conversations around land management, around the science of conservation, et cetera. So you may be thinking, like, what does this have to do with ecological economics? Well, I think a couple of things. So first of all, we are talking about the science of sustainability. And, while the language used in this book is around conservation, certainly that a lot of the themes she talks about are very holistic and very oriented towards sustainability and the sustainability conversations that we have in ecological economics. I think the other thing I took from this also was that I think ecological economics and conservation are similar in that arguably their goals are very synergistic and compatible with the goals of, for example, some of these indigenous communities, for example, living sustainably and well into the future on the earth, right? I think that we all share that goal. And yet, in academia or in the field are the ways in which we are kind of operating in a very Western paradigm and marginalizing folks who have a lot of expertise and things to share on this topic and not adequately elevating their voices and including their voices. So I think, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think it's both like an encouraging and a self-reflective moment, I think, for me reading this book. I also really appreciated some of the history lesson. I'd read some other authors about the indigenous experience in the United States, but I was less familiar with the history of the indigenous experience in Latin America, which is obviously very influenced by the United States, as she points out. And so that was helpful for me to kind of see some of the parallels in that. So that's why I chose the book. Oh, and I should mention that this author now has a new book out. I believe it's called Papaya. It has a papaya in the title. It just came out in November 2025. So I was thinking of choosing that book, but then I thought, well, maybe people won't have time to get it, but I intend to read that one too. So, all right. So with that, I'd love to throw it open. I have prompts that we can discuss if nobody is forthcoming, but I am also very content to just fade into the background and let you share what you thought about the book, what it prompted for you, and how that relates to, the conversations we have in ecological economics. So I will just throw that open and step in if there's silence.
I guess I thought it was. So I'm coming from agricultural and resource economics, and one thing I've been struggling with as I'm trying to kind of get more involved with ecological economics is just like, how do we do science when we're using a more holistic way of thinking about the problems and the solutions, and when we can't necessarily define those problems and solutions in the tools and frameworks that we're typically expected to in science, and what to sort of do about that, and how to phrase the problems and the solutions and why. And I felt like the sort of experience that she describes of like the indigenous sort of ways of knowing and ways of relating to nature not being able to be quantified in this through this Western science lens is sort of like, I don't know, related to the essence of the issue that we face in ecological economics. It's kind of like, so you can't like put, a value on these things. Why are we gonna do anything about them. And her kind of argument about indigenous cultures and identity being just so inherently tied to those things, and describing those values in terms of culture as a way to kind of like validate them. um I don't know, it's kind of like all really fresh in my mind, but this is just something I kind of thought about.
Yeah, I can see that, certainly, being outside kind of the mainstream of academic thought. Yeah, there's some, and people questioning, your ways of approaching a topic and your ways of knowing. Um, yeah. Other reactions?
Kind of in that vein of sort of shifting the way that maybe we approach some of the topics of research, or maybe the work that we do. The idea of conservation is pretty ubiquitous across any sort of environmentalism, whether that be in the professional realm, in the research realm, or even the activist realm. And she sort of pits it against what is it called? I am Jason from DGI. Um, she pits it against this idea of healing, and sort of this idea of conservation for the sake of beautification, or sort of for the sake of being able to more easily extract resources, versus this idea of sort of being a whole kind of body of nature, humans included inside of that definition of nature, and especially this idea of it's very common to sort of think that in whether it be academically, scientifically, or just socially, we think about humans as sort of like scourges on the earth, and like we're the problem. But she sort of really like emphasizes this idea of like what can we give back, sort of to the nature that provides for us. And she brings up this idea of sort of the reciprocity that also comes up in another Indigenous writer, Robin Wall Kimmerer, in her book Braiding Sweetgrass, or The Serviceberry, right? So these sort of ideas, I think are interesting, and personally, I found it very interesting, this Latin American perspective, just because I'm personally from Honduras. She brings up sort of the relations between Central America and Mexico, Central America and the United States, and then Mexico and the United States, and also the indigeneity and how that sort of also relates to Latinisms and that sort of thing too. So these are things that sort of stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, I also love Robin Wall Kimmerer's work. I highly recommend. Any other thoughts or reactions, or even thoughts about what, the themes we've been talking about?
I guess for me, it's interesting with the indigenous populations, whether it's in North America or Central America. I mean, particularly in Central America, Latin America, they pretty much do ecological economics. They don't call it, I mean, that's how they live. And, there's a lot that we could learn from them, if we actually paid more attention and participated more. Uh, uh, the things that they do are so good, largely for the environment, for the earth, because they have to. And if we would just pay a little bit more attention, and adopt some of those, uh, the things that they do, I think we'd be a lot better off in a lot of ways.
Stephen, go ahead.
I hope you'll forgive me for asking this. Um, I am intrigued by the idea of a indigenous science. Robin Wall Kimmerer strongly alludes to the idea of um, human beings being natural scientists. Uh, so I take it in that vein. Um, I wonder if anyone would like to sort of give a sketch of what that might mean, uh, maybe for purposes of us talking about it here today. Um, see, healing indigenous landscapes. Well, I mean, we could be talking about healing all landscapes. So I'm just very curious how you would um, frame it.
Can you repeat the question, Stephen? I'm not sure I understand what
Okay,
you're.
so the idea of indigenous science, I'm relating that to the reference by Robin Wall Kimmerer, to the way that human beings, uh, pre-hierarchy or pre-state societies, um, function in from a position of being natural scientists, um, being much more attuned to the system that they're living in than worrying about their place in any hierarchies. And so we, as post or living in state systems, we are always worried about our position relative to other people, our incomes, our housing, all kinds of hierarchies that we're embedded in. And so the systems that we're concerned with are in many ways just mainly of human origin, human creation, whereas people pre-state, and this is probably going into the era of pre-state agriculture, uh, are natural scientists. They're attuned to their system, extra-human systems. And I'm assuming, or I'm inferring, that Jessica Hernandez has uh, addressed this sort of posture in the way that in whatever it is she's talking about. Which I just downloaded the book, so I'll have a chance to listen to it sometime soon.
Yeah, well, I think that's a big question. I guess I can pull out something that I took from the reading, and then others absolutely feel free to add your thoughts. So the theme that comes out at me from her writing and also from Robin Wall Kimmerer's writing is the concept of relationality, right? That an indigenous worldview is very much about reciprocity and relationality, and the idea that we need one another, we depend on one another, including, as you said, the more than human community, the plants and animals. There's a traditional greeting in Anishinaabe, the indigenous people where I'm from, that begins like greetings to all my relations, which means every living thing that I am in relationship with, right? Plants, animals, etc. Um, so I think you're right that the focus of her worldview is on relationship, not on hierarchy and status. And so, what does that mean for the ways that we conceptualize, ecology, conservation, economics? I mean, I think it's interesting to think about, like, what does an economics of relationality look like, right? Because that could be the ecological economics that we're working towards. So that's one of my thoughts. I'd love to hear others. Or I could offer another thing that came to mind when you were speaking, and this relates to your point earlier, Elena, is the ways of knowing, like how do we know, how do we do science, how do we know about things. And so I believe she shares an anecdote in the book about um, in a class at a university volunteering a teaching from her peoples that was taught to her by her mother, her grandmother. And the fellow, I forget, it was one of her fellow students, the professor being like, well, how do you know that? What's a citation? What's the journal article? And she's like, like, this is, and her point is that this is the accumulation of thousands of years of knowledge of observing the system that her ancestors lived in that was passed down. But because it was not presented in a format that academia recognizes, it was not considered, valid knowledge, even though, you could argue it has probably a lot more validation behind it than any journal article. And so, one of the things that I think we should consider as if we are academics, if we are practitioners, if we're in ecological economics, is how do we, bring together those different ways of knowing, which are equally valid, and in some cases more valid, right? And Robin Wall Kimmerer, you mentioned, talks about this in Braiding's Week. She calls it braiding, right? Like how do we incorporate those different ways of knowing? So that's another thought that I had.
Yes, that's why I was really getting towards with the comment I made initially was with, you know, they just do it. It's science for us, but for them, it's daily life. And so it's not really written down per se for a citation. It's just doing things and there is science there. It's just they don't think of it that way because that's their lives. But for us, where it's so different, it is science and there's so much for us to learn. And, you know, the documentation piece, he's in Barcelona, but he's from Honduras, a very good ecological economist. And um, they do these things all the time and trying to incorporate that into the university system there. And it's hard for them to break through because uh, it's just their daily life. And so uh, I think that's where the importance comes into play is for us as ecological economists is understanding these things and paying attention that, things that we think of as scientific, um, probably aren't in the sense of people's daily lives. And we need to start incorporating that as uh, things that are important. And, we overlook those because we think technology and all these other aspects quite often. And at least my 2 cents anyway.
I would like to ask a kind of a question that might take us off the specific topic of this book. Let me frame it this way. My work, I call it the epistemology of relational sovereignty, and I've been working to really dive deep into the question of how do we understand multiple points of view in a way that does not require one to dominate over another. I've gotten deeply into this question of relationality. I would very much enjoy a chance to review some of my ideas in the context of this book, if you would welcome that. I would like to maybe preface a little bit, tell you a little bit about it, and then you can tell me if you want me to keep going.
Yeah, Stephen, I think that it's great to, bring in, our own work. Maybe I'll just ask like if there's any others who want to kind of bring up a reflection or a topic, and then we can kind of sequence, make sure we have time for everybody to chime in. But if not, yeah, go ahead. What's your, Elena, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I kind of did have a thought that I wanted to get back to at some point, which was related to the concept of invasive species. I don't know if other people, if that kind of stood out to other people. But I like, again, I'm kind of like new to conservation in general. And like, I guess thinking about like this idea of like native species and like native landscapes, that is like kind of really central in a lot of the conservation discourse. And then seeing her kind of challenge that by the recurring theme of the banana and the banana tree. Um, I guess like that was, for me, that was really something I think I gained from the book, is just like questioning that discourse a little bit, and kind of, I guess, all even potentially like tying back to some of the themes I think Stephen might be getting at, but just this sort of like, okay, well, this is the landscape now, and like how do like people and uh plants that have been moved or forced to be moved to other places, then go on and kind of heal and become a part of a new landscape, a new existence, a new ecosystem. I don't know. I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, just in general, like the thought about, oh yeah, banana is like not native to that region, but it is like very important now culturally, in any case.
Okay. I think those are both really great topics. So Stephen, do you want to like chat, like we can do like 10 minutes on, or less if we wrap up on what you want to talk about, and then we can, I'd love to talk about the invasive species thing too. I think that's really fascinating. So then maybe we can do that.
So I do hope to get a chance to talk more about it at the USSEE conference.
Okay.
I'm hoping to lead a session called relational research, which is distinguished from relational science, which is a term I've coined for what I'm doing. Um, the There are a couple of points, and I am absolutely not going to be able to really explain my ideas in a holistic way, but there are a couple of points that I think are worth exploring with y'all. Um, the first idea is that to have an epistemology of relational sovereignty, you have to distinguish between epistemology and ontology. Ontology is something that was developed by the Greeks in a time of war when they needed to be able to muster resources to fight wars. And this is the foundations of Western philosophy and the entire foundation of Western industrialism, the idea and hierarchy, because that's the other thing they established at that time. So there we become completely, our minds are held in this framework of uh, you have to match ontology and you have to succeed in hierarchy. And what I'm suggesting is actually there's another way to look at what we are and how we can relate to each other, which is to say, the epistemology. We don't need to commit to the idea of ontology because ontology is just another epistemology. We say, actually, the epistemology that matters is the one about relationships. And it says, you don't even need to worry about what is true ontologically. You only really need to understand what your relationships are with each other and pay attention to, and this is the second idea I wanted to get to, what I call a circulation of information. So the four primary nodes in that circulation: action, consequence, learning, and revision. And then from revision, you return to action. And if this information is circulating unobstructed, you have a society that's adaptive and flexible, and people enjoy sovereignty through the relational fabric. That kind of wraps it up. That's what I'm doing. That's a very brief summary of the ideas that I'm trying to put into the world.
That is really interesting. So I have a reaction to that, and then I'd love to hear others. Um, so that's fascinating, and I love the idea of moving towards a relational epistemology. I will say that there is some research. As you were talking, I was thinking about like research on group process. I was also thinking about the gender dimension, right? So when you said originally, oh, we're conditioned to compete in a hierarchy, I was thinking to myself, like, you know, who is more socialized to compete in a hierarchy and who is more socialized to be relational? And there's actually empirical evidence that, you know, groups that are women led or women facilitated or have women in them actually do operate more in exactly the way that you're describing, right? But that is not held up as a value or something to emulate in our society typically. Um, uh, and you know, of course, in a patriarchy, women are often shut out of positions of power and resource and making decisions where they can, or the ones that make it there are expected to imitate the behavior of men, right, and be more of that hierarchical. um, so that's one thing I was thinking of. Like, if you, interestingly, some of this literature is in the business literature, like, believe it or not, about like how people make decisions and how groups make decisions and what are the, so that's kind of what I thought of. Others, what do you all think about this topic?
Well, let me just answer you, Laura, that as I investigate and look for connections, for example, I have Pluriverse on my desk. I have Disaster Anarchy on my desk. What's the other one? I have another one that I just acquired. Oh, this one by Ronald Prosper. So as I look around for different literatures to try to connect with the work I'm doing, feminism definitely comes up as one of those sources. Uh, Indigenous wisdom and knowledge definitely is an important source. Um, if I may be immodest, I think that what I'm doing that's different is consolidating a bunch of ideas and taking the moment to actually pull apart the ontological foundations of Western science from the epistemological nature of relationality. See, we don't really need to worry about ontology. It's the relationships that we need to care about because oppression, injustice, extraction, those are all activities of ontological and hierarchical organization. Once you start talking about relationships as your primary focus, so how's my relationship with this person, that person, the next person? How my group with your group? When we think about those things and we seek to come into peaceful equilibrium, everything is different. That's the foundation argument there. And the work that the indigenous people are doing is just amazing. I mean, I'm really, really excited because that could turn into, over the next centuries, that could turn into the pathway. But I hope to make the contribution of actually bringing some sort of a theoretical consolidation to that. So I hope I stimulated some other thoughts. I mean, Peter, Deborah, Brenda, Helena, Jason, jump in. I'm going to try to calm down. It's a little exciting to be able to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, I found very consistent with the themes of the book. Not only, relationships between people, but relationships, among, again, the more than human world, the natural world, and humans, and reconceptualizing that, which, you were saying like a hierarchical mindset. I mean, clearly in dominant Western culture, the mindset is one of human dominance over nature, right? Like a hierarchy as opposed to a relational context. Yeah. So that fits as well. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Or we can talk about, so that was interesting. And I look forward to seeing more at the USSEE conference. But we can also, Elena, I wanted to address what you raised about invasive species. So you were saying it was kind of surprising. You were saying it was a little bit surprising to you, kind of her perspective on invasive species, which you felt was different. Correct me if I'm not saying that right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I mean, for me, as someone new to this space, yeah, I was certainly like, oh yeah, you know, how can we reconcile this kind of inclusion of a non-native species as an important part of healing the landscape or maintaining as we move towards healing. So that was eye-opening for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was struck too by that as well. It is, um, being trained as an ecologist and actually having a summer job at one point to tear out invasive species from the lake bed in Lake George, in the Adirondacks. Yeah, this is a very different way of looking at it, but it is very thought-provoking, right? And much more of a kind of relational view, like we've been talking about. And I loved that she said, like, okay, even if the right thing to do is to remove the species, you still need to have respect and kind of some kind of acknowledgement of that is a living being that you're impacting, right? I mean, I just think about like how different our lives would be if we just had respect for all living things that we impact on a daily basis. Like, I feel like that would be a really transformative way to live. And I will admit that, I and probably many of us are pretty far from that, but it's kind of aspirational.
I also found it interesting how in that same breath where she's talking about, right, how we view invasive species and how they've sort of integrated into sort of the day-to-day lives of people, right, centuries later, after they were introduced, she holds up this sort of mirror also to people, I mean, her words, and I'll also say it, right, people who are white, who came, people who sort of have a European background, a stronger European background. And she kind of says like, would you call that, this group of people an invasive species, right? And that's sort of provocative, right? And it's interesting because like I don't think most people you wouldn't find them saying something like that. But yet, right, there's this sort of general violence towards these like name an invasive species, like, oh, this shouldn't be here. We need to get rid of it. So it sort of offers this ability also to reflect on if we sort of create this relationality where all living beings or even non-living beings are sort of looked at into this like larger system, a global system, then it kind of becomes like an opportunity to then it's like if you wouldn't talk about this way, then maybe you shouldn't think about this way, or maybe if you would, then it has to apply in all cases. It's just an interesting sort of like tool to sort of then find a new way of sort of then like moving forward, whether it be with research or how you socialize, or how you find solutions for our challenges right now.
Yeah, really great point. Yeah.
I think related and maybe a little opposite of that in the sense of the ability for the environment to adapt, the ability for human beings to adapt when you have invasive species, to some of the points that were made, you know, just removing them, that's what we think like, oh, we gotta get rid of them. But and a lot of times that is the right way. But in other efforts or other scenarios, it might be best just to leave things alone and let things adapt. And we see that coming, time and time again of how the environment is really remarkable, and how it adapts to things, no matter what we throw at it. Is there going to be a collapse at some point? Yeah, maybe. But the adaptation that occurs is truly remarkable. And maybe to Jason's point, if humans got to that point, we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah, it also makes me think about how the baseline for well, and she touches on this in the book, and I've read this in other places too, that the baseline for kind of conservation in at least the United States, which I'm more familiar with, is a very colonial baseline. Like it's basically like it should be the way that it was when Europeans got here, and I think slowly we've gotten a little bit away from that, recognizing that indigenous peoples shaped the landscape for millennia, before, European colonists showed up. Um, but I think, yeah, it's interesting that invasive species thing is still stuck there, right? The notion that like, oh, well, this wasn't here 100 years ago, so it doesn't belong. Meanwhile, humans have been shipping species around the globe and adapting things for tens of thousands of years, right? I mean, if you look at like where different foods come from, like there are foods that are staples of people's diet today that were not there 500 years ago, right? And like, so what is like what is invasive? It's very defined in a colonialist Western context. Um, so yeah, I think that's another way she's kind of challenging. I appreciate that she's taking like these concepts that were just taught and kind of not really questioning a lot of times and saying, well, wait a minute, where did that come from? Is that the way we want to think about it going forward? And I really appreciate scholars who do that. So yeah.
I guess that also kind of like uh brings up another point like about the um I guess the colonialized conservation essentially like in some cases or I guess in many cases being effectively a tool to prevent access to natural resources for subsistence purposes. And I guess I uh, I feel like the book kind of develops this as like explaining how people are increasingly just like prevented from being able to exist outside of the global capitalist system. Just being, any resources that they might be able to access that would allow them to kind of continue surviving without participating um, in this global capitalist empire are just slowly being taken away from them, and they have been for hundreds of years. Um, and the places where that hasn't happened yet, as you were saying, are still very, I guess, some of the most rich places that we have. And then in some of these like protected areas, there are maybe even other problems that emerge because of the conservation management practices, the colonized conservation management practices.
Yeah, I think that goes back to Locke, and the idea that undeveloped land, quote unquote, undeveloped land that has not been, quote unquote, improved for the benefit of economic activity, doesn't have is isn't granted entitled to the people who actually occupy that space. I'm pretty sure Graeber and Wengrow in The Dawn of Everything talk about that. Um, yeah. So I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge Jason's question mark about the identification of white people as possibly being invasive, and the author's assertion. And I just think it's really important for us to realize that when you're arguing up the ladder of hierarchy, you have more privilege to say challenging and um, to make accusations if you want to. That when you're talking about uh, powerful people who may have done things for selfish reasons, you get to call them out. I think as a white person, as a colonialist in this country, I am duty bound to hear that and let that rest and not react as somehow, oh, this is like reverse racism or some bullshit. I don't care. And when you encounter that white person, just tell them, dude, I am charging up the ladder of hierarchy. You got more power, more privilege, and you're just gonna have to listen to that. That's my response to that. Um, there was more,
No,
but I'm gonna stop there.
yeah, no, and I appreciate you saying so. And really, I bring it up more because I this group, if we're talking about this book in the first place, I think this is a safe space to be able to sort of bring up these ideas. And I'm thankful that y'all have proven that. But then also, I was really trying to get at this point of in the same way that sort of the bananas, for example, have become very much integrated into the lives of the indigenous people in Central America. There is an opportunity for, say, let's keep using these racial terms, uh, people who present as white. There's an opportunity for them to also be integrated into this system that is called the Americas, right? It just seems that there hasn't been a reckoning with that. There hasn't been sort of this real like reflection or really real intent to do like do the hard process of what it means to sort of integrate into an area where there are indigenous people. And she kind of gets into this with I think it's like there's this onion analogy about like what it means to decolonize and how the first layer of like cutting an onion starts to make you tear up and that's hard. And then to get to the core, right, to get to this, I think she calls it kind of like the core, the sweet core that you want to get to. There's just a lot of layers that you got to peel back. But then sort of in all this kind of brings me to another question that I had for this group. Um, as I think UC in general is sort of really made up of researchers and academics and scientists. And so, of course, there is a level of power and a level of like a relationship to the established institutions. So then this book sort of presents this idea of questioning science and going against sort of some of the paradigms that exist. I think there's a specific quote. She says something like, yeah. I always question science, no matter, no matter like who or what it is that's presenting it. And that languaging is very similar, maybe even to people who are like anti-vaxxers or something like that, or believe in things that we would say like are just I don't know. I can't think of a word, but just like not good opinions, let's say. But I think how she's presenting it more as a challenge for scientists and researchers to go beyond sort of the general tools that are already available to them and sort of bridge this gap between the generational knowledge that exists. So the question I'm trying to get to is my background is really more in bioengineering and agricultural engineering, and I haven't really moved into sort of a more research-based job. For people who are sort of in that sort of realm, I'm wondering how these words sort of resonate with you and what that maybe means for maybe work going forward or how it's already been sort of implemented in your work.
Jason, would you just take a moment to just pinpoint the words that you're talking about?
Maybe to make that also more succinct. Um, how does this idea of questioning science and going against sort of maybe the westernized idea of what science is supposed to do and its purpose, how does that relate to your work? Uh, and does it present a meaningful challenge for you? Um, does it mean that something different kind of has to happen? And maybe how does that relate to ecological economics?
I'll answer that question. Um, with the exception of indigenous science, epistemology, relational science, uh, all of Western science is ontological. So it's asking what is. And then when it establishes an approximation, a model that seems to be predictive about what is, quote unquote, what is, then it uses that as a fulcrum against which to force people through hierarchy and uh, claims of truth to do stuff. So the way I relate to the idea of Western science is that some realms of ontological work are really helpful, like medicine, engineering, a few other things. But when it comes to marketing, I don't want Western ontological science doing any damn thing because I don't like to be marketed to personally. And, like Western ontological science that produces social media through the deployment of, they think of these models, they construct social models and they say, okay, well, this is the way it is in the world. And if we do this, this, and this, we can make money. So it's the ontological orientation that's pulling profits and extracting wealth from the society. So I don't really want them in there. What I want in there is people be asking, okay, if we do this, how's it going to affect the other person? Do we maintain sovereignty? The question about the vaxxers, for example, vaxxers are the conventional ontological way to talk about vaxxers, if you're not a vaxxer, is that they're self-deluded, that they don't understand the science. But my feeling is, oh, wait a second. The problem with the vaxxers is not that they're doing bad science, which they are. The problem is they don't care about the rest of us. Those of us who actually think that vaccines are good, I want to be respected. If the vaxxers weren't out there taking over the medical institutions and spewing all kinds of bullshit about vaccines causing autism and what have you, for a really long time, I was just like, okay, well, whatever, you go do your thing as long as you don't try to impose it on me. Well, now they're imposing it on me. That's what I oppose. And that's a relational problem. That's not a science problem. That's not an ontological problem. That's a relational problem. And we need to define it that way, that there is something about our relationship that you're not attending to. Please care about me. Care about me, not on the level of convincing me that your ontology is correct. Care about me in the way that I am a sovereign human being who has a right to believe what I believe. You do that, I'll give you the right to believe what you believe. Just don't impose it on me. If we don't impose on each other, we're all good because it's about relationships.
Well, this is I want to respect, people's time. Probably a lot of you popping in here on your lunch hour. And Jason, that I just want to acknowledge that's a really big and important question. And I think it is absolutely one that all academics should be grappling with. I mean, it's funny because ideally science is built on questioning, right? That's how we're taught to do science. You question, and yet maybe what she's getting at here and what we can think about is who is allowed to ask questions and whose questions are taken seriously, right? That's sometimes how I think about it. But I just want to appreciate all of the points that you all made. I appreciate you diving into this book with me. We just scratched the surface. I know we could probably talk for 3 hours about it. But I really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate all of you joining today. So stay tuned. We do these book clubs, as John said, usually like once a semester-ish, although this one's a little delayed. If you have any suggestions for books to read that are related to ecological economics, please feel free to email me or pop them in the chat. I'm the one that picks them, so they're basically just books that I like. So sorry, it's a little bit of a hierarchical approach, but I take suggestions into account.
Do you have like a place where the previous ones are listed?
Yes, if you have not yet subscribed to the USSEE YouTube channel, all of our previous book discussions are recorded in that channel. So the books are in the description, I believe, of each video. Yeah. Yeah.
I just put the link in the chat.
Thank you, John. All right. Well, take care, everyone. It was great to have this discussion with you, and I hope you join us for the next one. And I hope you check out other USSEE offerings and webinars going forward. But thank you all.
See you all at the conference. Bye.
Yep. See you at the conference. Bye.
Thank you, Laura.